Have you ever had one of those nights where something just doesn't feel right? A quiet, eerie stillness that settles over you and won't let go. You're just doing your job, trying to get through the night, when out of nowhere, everything changes. These are the kinds of stories that don't come with explanations, the kind that leave you questioning what's real and what's not. Tonight, we're diving into unsettling, true experiences of pizza delivery drivers who've had their own run-ins with the unknown. They're stories you'll never forget, if you're brave enough to hear them. Cut to the first story. My name is Patrick. I've been delivering pizzas for a little over 3 years now. It's a job like any other, I guess. Most of the time, you're just driving around, dropping off orders, and getting tipped. But sometimes, there are those moments that stick with you. Things you can't explain, things that make you question the world around you. These are the stories that don't fit in with the usual "hey, I had a great night" conversations. They're the ones that hang around in your head, making you rethink everything when you turn off the lights at night. I remember this one night in particular, one that I can't shake off. It was just another shift. I had been working for hours, making the usual rounds in a neighborhood on the outskirts of town, a place where the streets weren't well lit, and the houses sat far apart from each other, almost isolated, nestled behind old trees and overgrown bushes. You know the type of place I'm talking about, the kind of neighborhood that feels frozen in time, almost forgotten by the world. It was about 11:30 p.m., and I was nearing the end of my shift. I had one last delivery to make, a large pepperoni with extra cheese. I pulled up to the address on my GPS, a little confused because it was the only house on the street that didn't have a porch light on. Most of the homes around here kept their lights on all night. You know, the kind of dim light that gave the place a sense of safety, but not this one. This house stood dark, hidden in shadows like it didn't want to be seen. The house itself was strange. The kind of place that looked like it hadn't been renovated in decades, maybe longer. It had a long, sloping roof, with ivy climbing up the sides, covering most of the windows. The front yard was a mess, untamed grass, fallen leaves that hadn't been touched in weeks, maybe months. It was unsettling, but I'd been to stranger places in my time as a delivery driver, so I didn't think too much about it. Just another delivery. I parked my car, grabbed the pizza, and walked up the stone path leading to the door. The stones were cracked in places, and some of them had moss growing on them. As I walked, I noticed how quiet it was. Not a sound. No crickets, no cars passing by, not even the occasional barking dog. It was like the entire world had just stopped. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. When I reached the door, I noticed something odd. The doorbell was one of those old-fashioned ones, brass, a little tarnished, the kind you see in old movies. I rang it, and almost immediately, the door creaked open. I stood there for a second, waiting for someone to come out, but nobody did. It was like the door had opened on its own. A strange chill ran through me. I called out, "Pizza delivery." No answer. I called out again. Still nothing. It felt wrong. So I stepped inside. Yeah, I know. In hindsight, that was a huge mistake. The moment I crossed the threshold, the air changed. It wasn't just colder, it was heavier, thicker, like the house had absorbed decades of silence. The hallway was dark, and the only light came from a single, flickering bulb overhead. There were no sounds coming from deeper in the house, no footsteps, no voices. Just silence. The kind of silence that felt like it was pressing in on you, suffocating you slowly. I called out again, "Hello? Is anyone here?" My voice sounded unnaturally loud in the emptiness. Then, from somewhere deep within the house, I heard something that made my stomach drop. It was a whisper, soft at first, so soft I wasn't sure if I heard it at all. But then it came again, clearer this time, like someone was standing just around the corner, whispering something that I couldn't quite understand. "Who's there?" I called, my voice trembling now. No response. At this point, I felt a knot form in my stomach. My instinct was to turn and run, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to see this through. I don't know why. I had the sense that if I left, something would happen, something I wouldn't be able to explain. I stepped further into the hallway, my footsteps echoing off the walls. The whispering came again, this time more distinct. It was low, guttural, almost like a groan. I froze. The hairs on my neck stood on end. There was something undeniably off about this place. I looked down the hallway and saw a door slightly ajar at the far end, a dim light leaking from the crack. It was the only room in the house that had any light. I don't know why, but I decided to walk toward it. My heart was pounding in my chest as I moved down the hallway. As I got closer, I could hear faint, rhythmic tapping coming from the other side of the door. Like fingernails against wood. Tap. 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 When I reached the door, I hesitated. Part of me wanted to knock, but I already knew no one would answer. So, I pushed it open just a little. What I saw made my blood run cold. The room was small, cluttered with old furniture, chairs and tables, all piled up in corners, dust covering everything. But the strangest thing was what was sitting in the middle of the room. It was a figure. A woman, or at least, I think it was a woman. She was sitting in an old rocking chair, facing away from me. Her long, black hair hung down over her shoulders, and her hands were clasped tightly together in her lap. The rocking chair creaked as if someone were gently rocking it, but she didn't move. Not a muscle. The only thing that moved was the faint tapping sound that was still echoing through the room, coming from her fingernails tapping on the wood, even though her hands weren't moving at all. I felt my throat go dry, and I backed away slowly, my heart racing. But before I could turn to leave, I heard a voice. A soft, cracked voice that sounded like it was coming from right behind me. "Don't go." I spun around, but there was no one there. I bolted out of the house faster than I thought possible, and as I reached the door, I swear I saw the figure in the rocking chair move, just a little, like she had tilted her head slightly toward me. I didn't wait to see more. I ran straight to my car and sped off without looking back. I'm not sure what happened in that house, but it felt wrong, like something was watching me the entire time I was there. I can still hear that tapping sound in my head when I try to sleep, and sometimes, when I close my eyes, I see that woman in the rocking chair. I never went back to that part of town again. And to this day, I still don't know who or what was in that house. But I can tell you this, there are things out there that we can't explain. And sometimes, it's better not to try. My name is Gabriel. I've been delivering pizzas for nearly 5 years now, and most of the time it's the kind of job that blends into the background of your life. You know, driving around, chatting with people, getting a few tips here and there. It's predictable. Easy, even. But every so often, you get a delivery that stays with you, one that's so strange, so unsettling, that it feels like something out of a nightmare. I've had my share of bizarre deliveries, but this one was different. It was late, around 10:45 p.m. The kind of time when the streets start to quiet down, and the world feels like it's settling in for the night. I was finishing up my shift, heading toward a house in a neighborhood I didn't usually deliver to. The GPS showed it was a block or two off the main road, so I figured it would be a simple drop-off. I didn't think much of it when I first pulled into the street, except for the fact that it was darker than usual. There weren't many streetlights, and the few that were there cast long, flickering shadows across the road. The houses were spaced out, sitting behind thick trees that looked like they hadn't been trimmed in years. It wasn't the nicest part of town, but not the worst either. Still, there was something off about it. A kind of eerie quiet that I couldn't place. I found the address and parked in front of a house that stood out, just a little too far back from the road, hidden behind a high fence with ivy crawling over it. The house was old, probably built in the 40s or 50s. It had a slightly faded, yellowish exterior, and the windows were obscured by thick curtains. The front yard was poorly maintained, with weeds poking out from between the cracked sidewalk and the porch steps. I grabbed the pizza and walked up the path, crunching on gravel beneath my feet. The air was cold, even for late October, and there was a strange stillness in the air, like the night was holding its breath. When I reached the door, I noticed the doorbell was missing. There was just a blank spot where it should have been. A little unsettling, but nothing too crazy. Maybe the family didn't use it anymore. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, harder this time. Still nothing. I stood there for a moment, wondering if maybe I had the wrong address. Then, out of nowhere, I heard a soft voice, almost a whisper, coming from the other side of the door. "Come in." It wasn't loud. It wasn't even clear. But it was unmistakable. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I stood there for a long second, my mind racing. Was it a prank? A weird coincidence? Maybe the house was empty and the wind had made the sound? But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I pushed the door open slowly, the wood creaking as it gave way. It didn't seem locked. The entryway was dimly lit by a flickering lamp that hung from the ceiling, casting strange shadows on the walls. The air smelled musty, like the house hadn't been aired out in ages. "Hello?" I called, feeling ridiculous. "Pizza delivery." There was no response, but I could hear something, faint footsteps moving somewhere deeper in the house, as if someone was walking away from me. I hesitated, looking down at the pizza box in my hands. My instincts were telling me to leave. Something about this place, about the way it felt, was setting off alarm bells in my head. But I couldn't just walk away without delivering the food. I called out again, my voice trembling slightly. "Hello? I've got your pizza." The footsteps stopped. There was a long, tense silence, and then I heard the softest whisper again, this time coming from somewhere just to the right of me. "Don't go." I felt my blood run cold. The voice wasn't like before, it was closer now, as if it was standing right next to me. And yet, there was nobody there. I spun around, heart pounding, but the hallway was empty. Nothing but the dim light flickering above and the walls, peeling in places with age. I wanted to leave. I should have left. But something kept me there. Maybe it was the fact that I had the pizza, or maybe it was just curiosity, the need to figure out what was going on. I started walking down the hallway, slowly, cautiously. Each step echoed in the silence. The house felt alive, somehow, like it was watching me, listening to me. The floor creaked beneath my weight, and I felt like the walls were closing in around me. At the end of the hallway, there was an open door. The dim light came from inside the room, spilling out into the hallway. The whispering had stopped, but my heart was still pounding in my chest, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being drawn toward that room. I stepped into the room. It was small, sparsely furnished. There was a couch covered with an old, tattered blanket, a coffee table with a few magazines scattered on top, and a chair that looked like it hadn't been used in years. But the strangest thing was the large, ornate mirror hanging on the far wall. The mirror was off. The glass wasn't reflective. It was almost like the surface was made of something else, something dull, like polished stone. But as I stared at it, I could swear the reflection in the mirror wasn't mine. At first, I thought it was just the poor lighting playing tricks on me. But no, there, in the reflection, was a figure. A woman. She was standing in the corner of the room, staring at me. Her face was pale, almost translucent, and her eyes were wide open, unblinking, as if she was watching me with a terrifying, unyielding intensity. I froze. I couldn't look away. The woman didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even seem to breathe. She just stood there, perfectly still. I don't know how long I stood there, just staring at her, feeling my heart race, feeling the air around me grow thicker, colder. Finally, I turned and ran. I ran so fast that I almost tripped over myself. I didn't care about the pizza anymore. I didn't care about anything except getting out of that house. I slammed the door behind me and didn't stop running until I was back in my car, my hands shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. As I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was still watching me. The image of that woman's face stayed burned into my mind, her eyes following me wherever I went. I never went back to that house. And I still can't explain what happened there. But to this day, I don't take deliveries in that neighborhood anymore. Some things are better left alone, hidden behind the doors we're too afraid to open. Some stories are meant to stay in the shadows, lingering in the corners of our minds long after the night is over. But whether we understand them or not, they remind us that sometimes, there's more lurking in the world around us than we can explain. If you've ever felt that chill, that strange unease, you know exactly what we're talking about. Thanks for watching, and remember, next time you order pizza, it's not just the delivery you should be worried about. Stay safe, and keep your eyes open. You never know what might be waiting in the dark.